You're listening to The Social Workers on WCDB Albany.
We're back. I'm Kathryn Zox, and we're starting over again this morning. I'm your social worker with a microphone, and you are listening to the Social Workers Radio Talk Show here at the University at Albany, WCDB FM. And our first guest is here. I've already done somewhat of an introduction. Peter Sacco, author of Right Now, Enough is Enough. Peter is an author, psychology professor, and former private practitioner. He's the author of many, many books and the former editor-in-chief of Vices. As I said, his new book is Right Now, Enough is Enough, and it's Overcoming Addictions and Bad Habits for Good. Welcome to the show. Nice to have you on this morning, Peter.
Hey, Kathryn, it's great to be on your show.
Great. Can you talk? Can you talk a little bit louder, or I don't know what kind of phone you're on. You're on a landline, I assume, right?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
I think it sounds okay.
Okay, it's okay. Good. All right. Right now, enough is enough. I like the title. Addictions. Okay. What your book is about overcoming bad habits and addictions, and but Peter, what's different about this book in terms of addictive behavior, stopping addictive behavior, different than, let's say, if you go to AA or go to a private practitioner, a psychologist or a psychiatrist? What makes your book different in terms of helping us to overcome bad habits and addictions?
Well, that's a good question, Kathryn. The reason that I believe it's different, and that many people have believed it's different, it took 10 years to put together. I worked with a lot of people that are former individuals that I worked with that had addictions, mental health issues, that are now colleagues, and many of them are out in the field, as well as practitioners, anything from cognitive behaviorists, which I am a therapist in that area, all the way to different areas of Gestalt, to which I consider a mentor of mine, Jack Canfield, who created Chicken Soup for the Soul, The Secret, and that. And Jack has taught me about the law of attraction, the law of intention. And this book, what makes it different is it is an eclectic model approach, meaning that I look at the entire compass of treating addictions through a biopsychosocial and spiritual component. So what makes it different is in AA, many individuals in AA, NA, and those types of spiritual support group models don't want to subscribe into the cognitive behavioral approach, the aspect of self-efficacy or rational emotive therapy, or let's just take this right now in the here and now and live with the self-efficacy, because many of them will talk about their backgrounds as, hi, I am Joe and I'm an alcoholic, or hi, I'm Joe and I'm in recovery. And then also applying the law of intention, law of attraction, which to a great degree, as I remember years ago talking to William Glasser, the creator of reality therapy, and and basically Bill says what you're thinking about right now is who you are, what you're becoming. So that's why it's different, that it creates a more formidable approach towards self-efficacy, self-empowerment in the here and now.
So are you saying for those of people who, because some of this is a little bit on the professional side, and we have lay people who are listening, and I want to make sure that they understand what you're saying. What you're doing is combining spirituality, behavior therapy, different modalities. Is that what it's more all-inclusive in terms of how you deal with an addiction or a bad habit?
Absolutely. It's basically as I remember when I was Dr. Harry Fish, I was on his show, and I remember his publicist or his program assistant said, so Peter, basically what you've created is a self-help manual for human living and addiction. And it's like, yeah, that's actually what it is. So there's something in it for everyone. So say that, you know what, Kathryn, say you don't believe, well, I don't believe it's a biological thing. Okay, then look at it from a spiritual point. Well, if I don't believe it in spiritual, well, look at it from a psychological, sociological perspective. And that's what it does. I dig into what is called bitter resistance. At the heart and root of most people's addictions and bad habits is bitter resistance. Something that has happened in the past that they've hung on to, either consciously or unconsciously, that it's like misery loves company, so I'm going to hang on to this because it gives me a sense of feeling empowered by being hateful or angry and spiteful towards others. And you know what that spite is? Basically, it's what Gandhi said. It's drinking the poison and waiting for somebody else to die.
Give us an example. Give us a case history, an example.
An
individual example, somebody maybe who's come in, you've seen in practice.
Yeah, the example I would use is the person who was either physically, sexually, or emotionally abused as a kid. And this carries on until 11 or 12. And I'll give you an example. I had a fellow that was on his 5th suicide attempt. And this person goes, well, if I'm not doing that, I'm a cutter. I'm a cutter, and I also drink a lot. And that's the way I mask it. And so, mask what, though? I would ask, like, what is it that you're actually masking? And then what we got down to is this: I hate myself, because if my stepfather was sexually abusing me and my mother was putting up with this by letting this guy stay in my house, our house, that must mean I'm a terrible person, because I'm worthless. Because if I was a lovable son, my mother wouldn't allow this to happen to me, and that guy wouldn't have been doing it to me. So the only way that I can cope with this hatred towards myself and the fact that I can't establish good relationships with anybody in the real world, i.e. women, to get into a marriage situation, is I'm going to punish myself. So it's a self-debasement where this resistance towards, I don't want to deal with the emotions of the past as ugliness, so I'm just going to keep drinking, cutting myself, and then the eventual, when the depression overcomes me, I'm going to go for another suicide attempt.
So, Peter, and then I'm assuming that you were able to resolve this with this patient, with this client. So what happened? How did you break that bitter resistance or that self-debasement? What did you do? How do you handle it? And using your example of right now is enough.
Yeah, great question. So what we did is we looked at, okay, what do you believe about yourself? Okay, so, even though these people said things about yourself, you took what they said and you believed that as the absolute truth, that must be, or their actions, as he said, you know what, Pete, actions speak louder than words. So I said, really? So if somebody acts a way towards you or says something to you in another language and they're smiling at you, and you're looking at it and going, okay, that must be true. They're smiling. They love me. So I feel really good about myself. But then you find out in the other language that they're speaking, they're actually calling you every dirty, disgusting name in the book, but they're smiling at you. Yet your perception of it changes instantly. And you see, that's what it is, Kathryn, is we allow other people's perceptions to infiltrate our systems and get into us. So I would then say, let's go in the here and now. The only thing that you have, your ability to look at, is right here, right now, what's in front of you. What is it that you really, really want in your life? And what, if you could be anything, and I always ask the magical question, I'm a genie, and I can give you one wish and you can have it right now, what would it be? Most people, it's not the $1 million thing, well, I want that. It was like, I want to be happy. Okay, great, we're onto something. So what is it that is going to make you happy? And then he's said, well, liking myself more, having this sense of self-esteem, being able to relate to other people better, but most importantly, being able to relate to myself better. So then I would ask him, what is it about your ability to not relate to yourself? What is stopping you? And then we got down to the nutshell in a nitty-gritty way that I'm the one who's my biggest enemy that's stopping myself, because I'm living with this bitter, resistant, preconceived cognitive script, or this way that I live repetitiously over and over and over, and I revert to that. So we do what I call in my book the clean slate. Let's wipe it clean right now, and let's design through the power of intention, creating new intentions for yourself, writing down what you want to be, what you see yourself, and feeling that. You see, Kathryn, when you're living in a state of bitter resistance, you're feeling the negative emotions from the past. And I believe neurologists have shown that negative emotions or negative thoughts take up more memory space than positive ones. So as soon as you dig in there, you got a whole whack of them. So what we want to do is get you, what I call in my book, into a state of sweet acceptance, meaning accept what has happened in the past as an experience, as a life lesson, but that is in the past. You are driving a vehicle, and everything that's negative is in the rear view mirror, your window in the back. And what's different about the rear window, your backlight in the back, is that it's a lot smaller than your windshield. Your windshield is infinitely bigger, and that's where you are right now looking ahead. And that's an area of sweet acceptance that I want you to drive towards your goals.
That's a great analogy, because if you're always looking in the rear view mirror, you never can go ahead. You can't move forward, right? If you're always turned around looking in the rear view mirror, it's impossible to drive forward on the highway.
Exactly. And what's happening when you're looking out the rearview mirror as you continue driving, it's getting smaller and smaller, so your ability to rationalize or understand what has happened in the past is getting weaker and more confusing.
Or you could just become a really awful driver.
That's Noah. That's one of the students here who's my board op.
Well, you know what?
I think that also fits your analogy there, too, because you wouldn't want to become an awful driver.
Yeah, and that's absolutely what it is, and that's what we do. If you think about it, and that's a great point you bring up, is that who's operating our vehicles of life? We are. We're our own drivers. We go from destination A to B to C to D. We're the ones who drive ourselves there. And you know what? You hear people go, well, you're driving me crazy. Yeah. We can only allow somebody to drive us crazy if we give them access to the buttons that we allow them to push. But at the end of the day, we're driving ourselves crazy by letting their self-talk get into our talk.
Peter, is it different for different addictions? I mean, we're talking kind of generally in terms of the approach that you take in helping people to stop looking at the rear view mirror and look at that big windshield and drive forward. But is it different whether you're an alcoholic, whether it's drugs, sex addiction, gambling, porn? I mean, does this work the same for all of the different kinds of addictions? This approach?
Yeah, absolutely it does.
Yeah.
That's a great question, Kathryn. It does, because all addictions are different. And there's no doubt about it. Some are more detrimental and destructive than others. I would say gambling is the worst, because it has the ability to destroy your life in a matter of minutes or less. If $100,000 gone, there goes your house, your lifestyle, your family. With that said, it's why all addictions start out the same way, basically, through curiosity, to see, well, what would it be like? But then once you get to a point of if you like it or not, it's still the same. But then it's like, why are people engaging in addictions? And that's where it becomes different. Some are for instant gratification, some are using it for pain relief, and some are doing it for the adrenaline rush. So with that said, the underlying cause, though, this bitterness that's deep down, that I need something to numb the pain, make me feel better instantly, or dissociate myself from my past, is the same. And that's what I look at and I try to get to in the book, to try to find what your bitter state is. Because once you can get in there, clean that area out. It's like the analogy I use in the book. You have something leftovers from last night's dinner, you put it in the fridge in a Tupperware container. If you go to eat it 2 days later, you can tell what it is. It's like, oh, this is good. Then you forget about it and you find it a year later, and it's all black, discolored, ugly as heck. And what was this?
Well, you've been in my refrigerator, I think.
Oh, mine too. They look like lab experiments. So you look at that, Kathryn, you go, what is that? I don't even remember what it was. And that's what it is with bitter resistance. You go so long by drugging, gambling, doing porn, sex addictions, narcotics, and then at that point there, it's like, I don't even remember how the hell I got to this point. This is just insane. And anybody that I've worked with that's in recovery after they've gone through a detox or a sobriety to a level, they'll say, I kind of remember how it started, and now I know how I got to this point, that I'm in this either through an intervention or whatever it is. But all the space in between is just like a blur. I've lost like 10 years of my life not even knowing where it went.
Well, if what you're talking about really does work, because I'm thinking about, and unfortunately I know a lot of young people who go into rehab, come out, residential rehab programs, for instance, and then end up going back. There's this constant, revolving door situation, particularly when it comes to drugs. So I'd be curious as to how much you've used this approach in drug rehabs, for instance.
It absolutely works. And the one premise that I'll always say right from the get-go is, if you have a physiological addiction to a drug to begin with, you do have to get detoxed. There's no way around that, meaning you have to go clean and get it out of your system first.
So that involves drugs and alcohol.
Yes.
And what about food? We have a huge addiction problem here in the United States when it comes to food. Let's put it in that context.
Yeah, well, once again, it's a moderation management thing if you want to look at it in terms of food. Let's be realistic. Everybody needs to eat to survive. So food is a different brand or a different beast, so to speak. Because if you look at compulsive eaters, or even if you flip it to the other side, a restrictive eater, like an anorexic, somebody with anorexia nervosa, or even somebody who has bulimia issues, or, which I've studied and I've written about it in blogs and I've written about it in books, is reverse anorexia or megorexia in guys who are obsessed with protein consumption, amino acids, and then eventually carries over to human growth hormone and steroid abuse. Once again, for them it's size. I need to get bigger because it's going to make me stronger. Where the anorexic is, I've got to get as small as I possibly can to hide myself, usually due to a psychological issue, because I've been sexually abused in my past, verbally abused, emotionally abused, or I need to fit in and be accepted. And the way that I can do that is by being really super thin. Or, as you brought up with a compulsive eater, somebody who just eats and gorges, they're doing it, that's their comfort food or their drug of choice. So and I know this, I'll give you a quick example. I worked with somebody that was in one of the big dietary programs you see on TV all the time. She had dropped, I think it was about 52 pounds, and she was looking very good. We would talk all the time, and she goes, I really like who I am. I am getting in touch with my femininity again. I feel like a woman again. And she goes, it is so healthy, I feel good. Then all of a sudden, I ran into her about 5 months later. She put on that 52 pounds all over again, that fast, plus an additional 20. It's like, whoa, what happened? And we talked about it, and she says, you know what it was, Peter? I had a couple guys make comments of me. One of them said, you have a nice you-know-what in the backside. Another one was like, baby, I'd love to take you home. And she goes, instantly, that was my trigger. I ate to protect myself. And what had happened is she had been raped in the past, and her comfort, her zone was eating to provide this comfort buffer around her. She says, because if I'm bigger, I'm less attractive, men will not look at me as a sexual object. And it's the same thing with the reverse or an anorexic, that if you eat or you deny eating, you get so thin, almost like a prepubescent individual again, where you're 15 to 20% below your normal ideal body weight, you're less attractive. That's in their mind. That's a bitter resistance aspect of it. Where
Peter, but those two are, and they're good examples, but they're extreme examples. And
yes.
So what about when you haven't, let's say somebody who is 50, 60, 70, 100 pounds overweight. I'm getting back to the weight thing because it's just so prevalent with amongst all of us. But they weren't necessarily raped when they were younger, or abused, or wanting to hide or cover up so that no one's going to be attracted to them, so that they don't have to face having a relationship with the opposite sex or the same sex or whatever it is. But so how does that work because there are people who are just compulsive eaters who don't have that kind of a history or a background?
Okay, so then the question then becomes, Kathryn, is are they addicted to eating a lot, or is it just a bad habit? And that's what I would need to, or what I scrutinize or discern in the book, that if it's a habit, I've got friends that are this way. Myself, I'm more of the fitness fanatic. I love that. So some people might say that I'm obsessed with eating good stuff. Now, so other guys, I got friends of mine, he's self-proclaimed, and he loves calling himself the human warehouse, where he just enjoys going to buffets, and he spanks back crab's legs and lobster tails, as many as he can get these down. And he says, I love this. I feel like a chia pet, and I enjoy it. And his wife will make fun of it and goes, well, I find that unattractive. And he'll say, well, this is every ounce of all men, baby. I've earned this. And the same with the beer gut. He's proud of it. With that said, okay, he doesn't view that he has a problem. Okay, if you get my point. He doesn't view himself as an addict. He's highly functioning with a great career. He's making tremendous amounts of money, lives very wealthy. So the only, I guess, the precursor here would be is that physiologically, if he's a heart attack candidate or a stroke candidate, that could be the downer in it. So with that said, if a doctor was then to point it out and says, okay, you know what, Mike, you've got to cut this out for that reason. And if he can't, because he says, then I'm addicted to this, then it becomes an issue, so to speak. So once again, it would be, why are you really needing to eat this amount of food? What are you trying to hide deep down? Is it an issue with your self-esteem? Is it, or are you in an issue where some people just eat and eat and eat, or they can't stop themselves because they'll say, when I was raised as a kid, I was told, you've got to clean everything off your plate because people in other parts of the world are dying of starvation. Or you never had a lot of food on your plate, so now you become this miser of food where you want to eat. So once again, it's a built-in mechanism deep down, or it could be just a simple bad habit of laziness where you're this, well, I'll get around to it. This is my New Year's resolution. Well, that passed. Well, Valentine's Day. Well, I'll wait till after Valentine's Day. Well, I'll wait till after Easter. I'll wait till it warms up. That's when I'm going to go start walking and eating right. So then it becomes this bitter resistance aspect of procrastination. So it's the same principle. You just have to get down and find what it is.
right, so then the bad habit would be similar to an addiction in terms of how you treat it, or you have to get down to why you're doing it, or why you engage in habits that are detrimental to your health, for instance. Okay.
Yeah, like I guess the clear point here is that when you have an addiction, no matter how many times you've tried to quit, you cannot. The only way you can quit an addiction is with outside intervention or help. And it's in your system if you're physiologically addicted to a drug, that your body needs it or it goes into withdrawal because you've developed up a tolerance to it, and alcohol is well known for that. Habits, on the other hand, Kathryn, you can do them when you kind of feel like it. You can control it to a degree, or a great degree, and you can stop it altogether. And that's the key thing with this, because a person that's a compulsive eater, let's say, if they really are addicted to it, they can't stop this eating on their own. They can't stop the weight gain on their own. They have to get some sort of outside source. It could be one of these big dietary companies that you go to. It could be a personal trainer. Then you know that you can't do this on your own unless you have an outside intervention, so to speak. But if you can do this on your own and you moderate it yourself, then you know it's a habit.
I'm glad. Yeah, I think it was important to make that distinction, because I think a lot of people, and sometimes bad habits morph into addictions, or they can.
Oh, heck yeah! I know. I've had some awesome run-ins with Haagen-Dazs late at night. That thing comes out. I've got the half-gallon pint of Haagen-Dazs ice cream, and it's like, okay, I'm only going to have a couple spoonfuls. Then a movie's on, and then I've punished that thing. It's gone. It's like, okay, well, I feel bad. I'll go on the treadmill tomorrow. And it's like, man, I got another one in the fridge tonight, and I can do the treadmill tomorrow. And you see what happens is it becomes this habitual cycle, almost like a lot of people probably listening there will say, you know what? My habit started this winter. If you're in a cold place like I am in Niagara Falls here, and it's been frigid this week again, people can just get into what I call the lazy chip eating diet at nighttime. It's like, well, I'm going to sit down, throw on, Criminal Minds is on. Oh, Without a Trace is on, whatever you're watching, American Idol. And I know a lot of women, friends of mine, that say, you know what? Dang that American Idol. When that American Idol comes on, I just want to eat. I get nervous for the contestants, and that's when I pull out the potato chips. And then it's like, oh my gosh, it's over, and it's May now, and holy cow, I've gained like 15, 20 pounds over the winter just being lazy. And you know what's interesting, Kathryn, is many people develop this psychological mindset of, well, it's the winter, I'm like an animal, I'm going to go into hibernation mode, and it's okay to gain all this weight. And we really rationalize it that way, that it's okay to be lazy in the winter.
Well, doesn't denial and rationalization and all of those defense mechanisms come into play when you're sitting there stuffing your face on fried food or whatever you're doing, and you know intellectually it's not the right thing to do? So it does become an emotional bad habit, or addiction, as you call it. I want to talk about, you mentioned the law of intention. And let's talk about that. I mean, because that's I think, something that not everyone is familiar with. What is the law of intention? How does that fit into this overall ability to be able to stop your an addiction and or a bad habit?
Well, the law of intention is, you can call it law of attraction, law of intention. I think there are the two.
Yeah, it's a law of attraction, isn't it?
Yeah.
Is that what? Yeah.
Yeah, and it's basically the one and the same to a degree. I think with law of attraction, you attract into your life, where thoughts go, energy flows, which means that many of us attract into our lives repetitiously, whether we want to accept it or not, or whether we believe it or not, things into our life based on what we think the most. So if I think it, as a man thinketh, so he becomes. That we will attract certain people, certain situations, outcomes into our life just based on the energy that we project out. There's quantum physics that has proven this, that has studied this. There's a lot of research, more and more coming out now, that the longer you hold a thought and you project that, it becomes matter. For whatever reason, there's a process that it's like gravity.
Peter, another example, a real life example. Give us one.
Prime example is that you keep thinking about somebody. Just, you're thinking somebody and you're like, man, I haven't seen that person in ages. All of a sudden you run into them. or they call you out of the blue.
Well, does this work if you've had a date and you want him to call back, if you just keep thinking about him?
Yeah, and it also works the other way. It's like, oh my gosh, I had this the other day. A friend of mine, she went out on a date. She met, somebody from internet dating, and she goes, oh my gosh, I screwed this up. He's never going to call me. I don't believe he'll ever call me. This will never work. And then he doesn't call. Well, what have you put out there? The intention that he's not going to call me. So it's like your wish is my command. That's what you want. That's what you're going to get. And it's the same thing, if you think about it. Have you ever just thought to yourself, a song's going through your mind? You get out of the car, you start the car up, you turn the radio, and that song that you were singing in your head is at exactly the same part where you were humming it. You go, how the heck is that possible? That's crazy. Well, that's what it is. Like, whether anybody, whether there's certain people go, I just don't believe that. Well, that's your right to not believe it. But there is a world that exists there, if you want to call it a frequency level, that we tap into, that we project, telepathically, if you want to put it out there, or energy-wise.
Electrical energy?
Yeah, I would call it electrical or neurotransmitter energy. That it must work. There must be something to it, because you have a such thing known as seizure dogs that can identify people who have seizures or are prone to have an epileptic seizure, a diabetic seizure, or whatever type of illness that they have, and the dog can pick it up before it even happens.
But I thought that was related to smell, too, or there's a certain odor that people who are about to have a seizure that will, that comes from their bodies that the dogs can smell.
Okay, yeah, exactly. But what is that? That's hormones that are being displaced by thoughts. It's perpetuated by the mind state, the brain state that sends out these signals. So the brain has to send out the message that something's wrong in the body for that body to react. So it's basically the premise is I think something first, therefore I will then feel it, and then once I feel it, I will act out that way, and then eventually I become it. So it's the same, the same principle to, and this is well documented.
So how does this work now in terms of an addiction? I feel that I can't stop drinking. I'm drinking that pint of Cutty Sark every night, but and it tastes good. So yeah. What do I do? I mean, how does the law of attraction work in that case?
See, with it, what you're doing is, if you said I can't stop drinking, and see with the mind, or the mind cannot conceive of negative terms. So if Kathryn says, Kathryn, you're saying, I can't stop drinking, what the mind is picking up is, I can drink. Because I can't stop is not being picked up. So if you said, well, I don't want to drink anymore, the mind is not picking up the don't part. It's picking up the I want to drink. So what's happening is you're setting an intention of more and greater negativity that's going to create more of what you don't want in your life. So with that said, is you want to, rather than focusing on what you don't want in your life, focus on what it is that you do want. So it'll be, okay, I want to be, if you're a smoker, I want to be smoke-free. Or if you're an alcoholic or a drinker, it's I want to see myself free from drinking, free from alcohol, free from this dependence. That's part of it. The next thing I want you to do then is to focus on, see yourself what it looks like to not be that, and then feel what it feels like. And how would it feel like? Well, it feels great. I feel like I'm free. I feel like I'm empowered. Those thoughts and feelings, those thoughts are going to generate feelings which make the thoughts extra strong, which literally will connect or recreate new neurotransmitters, new neural pathways in your brain, which deviate away from the slope. I like to say it's like a toboggan going down the hill. When kids go down the hill, they keep going down the same path. Or have you ever seen somebody where they cut across a lawn, and there's an entire lawn, but they just use this one little bloody area, and it's bald, the area, and they're like, what is this? It's crazy. There's all this other grass, but they got to go down that one bloody stretch. Well, that's what our negative thoughts become, even our positive ones, where if we keep thinking the same way, we keep creating that same pathway, and it's a lazy neural pathway where we don't think anymore. We just do it by repetition. And if you ask people who smoke, people who have anger management issues, they'll go from 0 to 60 in a second. They'll just snap. And they'll go, well, how did you get there so angry? It's like, I don't know. I just can do this. It's like a skill. It's a talent. And that's what it is. You go down the same neural pathway, And now, Kathryn, by saying, I want to be smoke-free, I want to be free from drinking, you're creating new neural pathways which now create new mindsets.
Well, I've really learned so much from you. And I have dealt with people with addictions, but it was many years ago as a clinician before I started doing this radio show. But this whole approach, I think, is unique. I guess that was the first question I asked you in the beginning. We have to say goodbye, Peter, because I got the next guest here. But I want to mention the name of the book again, because right now, Enough is Enough. Peter Sacco. Also, I want to know where we can go, your website or a website about the book, if listeners want, obviously, to more information.
Yeah, actually, you can go to the website right now, enoughisenough.com, and right there you can learn about addictions, habits, even codependency issues, bad relationship stuff, or you can get it through Amazon.com or my website, petersacco.com.
Terrific.
And it's all, yep.
Yeah, thanks so much for being on the show this morning. Great information.
Yeah, Kathryn.
Great information. Thanks. We're going to take a short.
Thanks. Have an awesome day.
Yep, you too. We're going to take a short break. Our next guest is here. I'm Kathryn Zox, your social worker with a microphone, and you are listening. To the Social Workers Radio Talk Show, University at Albany, WCDB FM. We'll be back in a minute with our next guest, Mary Sommerset, author of Letting Go for Fun and Profit.
Do you think you can tell if someone has AIDS?
Oh, I can tell.
I've been told that by guys, saying, oh, well, you look pretty fake to me. How do you know? How do you know who I've been with? You don't.
I could walk into a room and nobody would ever know. Nobody ever knows that I have AIDS unless I tell them.
You don't know.
Respect yourself, protect yourself. To learn more, call the CDC National AIDS Hotline at 1-800-342-AIDS.
Welcome back to the Social Workers on WCDB Albany.
I'm Kathryn Zox, your social worker with a microphone, and we are at the University of Albany on WCDB FM. Joining me is my next guest, Mary Sommerset, author, speaker, and certified professional coach. Her new book is Letting Go for Fun and Profit. Welcome to the show. Nice to have you on this morning, Mary.
Oh, thank you so much, Kathryn. I'm delighted to be here.
Okay, letting go for fun and profit. I guess letting go is not usually associated with fun or for profit, for that matter. So tell us why the title of the book and what are we talking about here?
Well, I wanted to start writing this book because I have an online community with Braveheart women, and I have so many women talking to me about being stuck and obstacles that they have, and then also inspiring stories of how they've overcome them. So I wanted to dive into the science of it, the research on neuroplasticity particularly, and I got the help of my co-author, Jean Stoll, who has 25 years in public health. And with my work in coaching and her work in public health, we've seen many people transform their lives. Well, so, Americans, we're kind of skeptical, so we like to have the science to back up how this is happening. And all the research I got was out of scientific journals and academic books, and I thought, hey, what about the rest of us? We need a book. So we made this short chapters with activities that you can do, and pithy and wise and funny quotations to start it. We wrote it kind of in an irreverent tone to make it fun. And we believe that letting go of the past, letting go of obstacles, you can have a lot more fun. So
yeah, well, this fits. My first guest we were talking about addictions and bad habits and letting go. So you're kind of the perfect follow-up for that. But this is kind of a whole different approach. So you're saying you have the Braveheart women who are trying to let go of what? Let's be more specific. What are we talking about in terms of what the problem is, and then how we deal with it in terms of science? And you obviously neuroplasticity is I think the key word here.
Yes. Well, the big umbrella word for that is to let go of the past. So if we don't hold on to the past and carry it around with us, we're much lighter, we feel better, we can do a number of things. And what we found with the neuroscience is that if you really concentrate for 2 to 3 months on your goal, what it is you want, you set your intention, let's say to lose weight, You set your intention, you write affirmations about it, you create a vision board with you, the way you want yourself to be, supported by all kinds of wonderful friends. And then you do that every day. You train your brain to think new thoughts, and amazing things can happen. Of course, it's not really easy. There are stages of change as well, which come into it. If you've been holding on to that weight for 30 years, maybe it's going to take you a little bit longer to let go of it because you're going to have to fight 30 years of a neural pathway. But you can do it. And the thing is, you can do it at any age. I mean, they've had tests now, of young people and seniors taking the same test. And if there's no time constraint, they will come up with the same results. Obviously, students, young people have quicker minds. They'll be able to get to it faster. But at any age, you can change your brain.
So you actually, and this is a whole new, this is really quite recent that, we've discovered that the brain has the capacity to be so plastic. I don't know if that's the right word, but we can change how our brain works by, now you mentioned how we do it. And you talked about losing weight. You want to lose 10 pounds or 20 pounds, or the doctors told you that you had to lose weight, or you could potentially have a heart attack or whatever it is. So you actually have the capacity to change those circuits in the brain so that you will be able to make changes in your lifestyle and your your lifestyle habits. That's what you're saying, right?
Yes, absolutely. And we have a whole chapter in the book on that. Well, actually, all through the book. We want people to play to their strengths. We want people to really understand that there are stages to change. Like the great book, Changing for Good, they talk about pre-contemplation. You haven't even thought about it yet, but maybe it's crossed your mind. Contemplation, you're thinking about it. Preparation, you're reading a book like this, Letting Go for Fun and Profit. You're taking some action. You're actually doing the activities. Then you're maintaining it. And then maybe you fall out a little bit, but you recognize that you really want to keep going forward, and you come back. And then after a while, this is the new you, and we have chapters on how to embrace the new you and feel good about it. And we're not making this stuff up. I mean, this is real science. So we're just taking the science and making it accessible for people.
It's about attitude change. If you actually change your attitude, is that what we're talking? I'm trying to be as specific as I can so listeners can understand it. So if you actually you change your attitude, you can eventually end up changing your behavior. Yes,
your thoughts really do create your life. So if you keep thinking, I can do this, I can do this, I can do this, you will be able to do it.
Like The Little Engine That Could, that little book they used to read to you when you were a kid, right?
Exactly. That was my favorite book as a child, The Little Engine That Could. And I thought, yeah, that's right, that's what I'm going to do. And I think I started those neural pathways then. And so that's a great book to read to your children.
I think I can, and then you can do it. Well, let's take each one of those specifically. Okay, so you have, you think you're trying to, we don't necessarily have to talk about changing bad habits. It also refers to something positive that you may want to do, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, maybe we should put it more in the positive. There's something that you want to achieve, and you talk about family, and whether in your family or social or business. Let's talk about business. Let's say there's something you want to accomplish in business, and you're not doing it, and you want to change those circuits in your brain, and you want to change your attitude, and so that you will be in a position to accomplish whatever it is that you feel you want to do in a business situation. Give us an example of that.
Well, I worked at a major corporation, and it was a software company, and we were going to move from selling software packages to selling software solutions. And this required the entire company, about 3,000 people, to move in that direction. So I had a meeting with all the vice presidents of the different divisions, and I was working for the chief technology officer of the company at the time. So I brought all these people into the room, and at various levels were they willing to do this. So it was a lot of change, even to come up with the name of the project. Nobody could agree, and so we just said, let's just call it Project X so that we can get going, and people agreed, okay, we can do that, Project X. But the idea is that there was one holdout, right, eventually, and we had a date of when we were going to present this. And we worked with that individual to help him really create new thoughts, to understand how this is going to be good for his division, to visualize what that would mean for him going forward and all of that. And then he finally came on board. So that kind of change in business happens all the time. I mean, businesses, you either adapt or die. I mean, that's the going phrase. And if you're not creating in your business, your business is not going to succeed. So, and creation, as we know, is all about change, is all about moving forward and trying something new. And that's why businesses are really ripe for this sort of thing. It's really a key place for this neuroplasticity to take hold.
Have you met, is there a lot of talk about resistance, just resistance to the overall idea that you can change those circuits in your brain so that you can think differently, whether it's in a problem-solving situation? Because some people look at it as, well, is that just voodoo? I mean, does that really work? Can you really, yeah.
It's not voodoo, and that's why I'm excited about this book, is that, I mean, there are books now out there called Pictures of the Mind. I mean, they're excellent books, and they have actual pictures of the mind transforming. They take a picture of a person working on a certain emotion and challenging that, changing their attitude about that emotion, and they take pictures along the way, and you can actually see the physical changes in the circuitry of the brain as this person is transforming. That is amazing to me, and that's why we wrote the book. We were so inspired by this and reading this information and really getting into it and saying, yes, this is really possible. You can change the neural circuitry in your brain. I mean, we have something like 100 trillion pathways in our brain. So it makes sense that if we just take a few of them and start working on them, we're going to be able to affect them. Well, and the good news is that the happiness circuits are the most plastic. So it looks like we were designed to be happier than we actually are.
Well, isn't that our right in our Constitution?
Yes.
Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I think they were onto something, right?
Yes, I think they were. And, this information is not new. It's just that the science has finally caught up with it and proven it to be true. I mean, like, we have quotations from Epictetus, who was a slave and then a philosopher in 100 A.D., and he really had it right to begin with. Like he says, for example, the philosopher pondered power of positive thinking. He said, there's only one way to happiness, and that is to cease worrying about things which are beyond the power of our will. And then he said, first say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do. And thirdly, he said, the key is to keep company only with people who uplift you, whose presence calls forth your best. I mean, that's fantastic advice. And if you would say, and that was in 100 A.D.
It's the same kind of advice that the therapists will give you today, right, in 2013.
Yes.
Yeah, don't hang around with people who make you feel bad about yourself, only people who are going to, as he said, uplift you. All three of those things, I think, obviously make sense. So let's talk about the pursuit of happiness, because that's a big topic. So let's say you're a coach and you have a client who is unhappy and employs you to help them to become happier. What do you do using this whole theory, or it's not really a theory?
My certification is in whole person coaching, so I'm going to look at the mind, the body, and the spirit. And a lot of times we find that one of the obstacle we have, we think is just in our body, but actually it's in our mind. Our mind really controls everything. So I understand as a coach that my clients know everything. They already have all the answers inside of them. My job is just to draw those answers out. Sometimes we get so busy and so fragmented in our lives, we don't have the time to go inside and be quiet, take that time for solitude, and allow those answers to bubble up. So a coach will then help draw those questions out and give feedback, play back and forth until the person really can understand, yes, this is what I want. And as a coach, I don't know what that person wants. I don't know what their ultimate goal is, but I will find out because they're going to tell me.
So it's your job kind of peel away at that onion until you get to the last layer.
Yes, that's one way to look at it.
I'm fascinated with this whole idea of neuroplasticity, and especially related to the aging population, because, I think one of the things is that we make the assumption that the older you get, you suffer from memory loss, you don't have the capacity to problem solve in the way you did, you're going to be less happy, all of those kind of negative things. So, and you say that this works, you can change your brain pattern thoughts even at any age. Can you do it at 80?
Yes.
How do you do it?
Yes, and this is what's so amazing. I mean, the idea that you can't teach an old dog new tricks, that's just flat wrong. And the idea, yes, that might take that dog a little bit longer to learn that trick, but he has the capacity to learn that trick. And that's what is so wonderful about this.
Well, how do you do it? Let's take the 80-year-old as an example. I'm always one, as a social worker, give me an example. How do you do it? You have a client or you have somebody who's 80 years old and their family is complaining. For all about, all the things that I just mentioned. You're older, you're slower, you can't remember things, memory loss, for instance, and not necessarily associated with Alzheimer's, just memory loss as we think about it as one ages, or depression. I mean, all of those things. How at age 80 can you help somebody to make those changes?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, the thing that makes us the happiest is to learn new things. So first it's to develop the attitude of I'm going to learn something new, or I'm going to read something new, I'm going to have a new idea, or I'm going to meet a new person, I'm going to have a new experience. And that's the first thing. Inertia is a very real thing in life, so you have to be able to overcome inertia. But once you do that and you take that first step, maybe even do an activity in our book. Just start somewhere. That's what Mark Twain said. I think it was Mark Twain about, it's all beginnings. You just have to start. That's the thing. So encouraging someone to say that, look, the science supports that if you make this shift, if you make this first step towards change, if you think a new thought, you're on the path to rewire the circuitry in your brain.
So just think the new thought.
Yes, think the new thought. I mean, I have known 85-year-olds who are sharp as a tack, who have never given up, who have never said, I can't do this, oh, I'm old, it's too bad. They keep hiking, they keep reading, they keep socializing, they do all that, they stay active. And so they don't have those problems. It really is our mind that is creating everything. I mean, it's not our stomach that tells us we're hungry, it's our mind. So those kinds of things, really understanding that we are in charge, that we can do this, it's our minds, and we take that first step. And if you've been saying, I can't do it for 30 years, yes, you might need some support, you might need some help in doing this, but hire a coach or a therapist or go to a support group or do whatever it takes to change your mindset, because it's all in your mind.
Yeah, I'm thinking old people or older people will often say, well, I've always done it this way, so this is the way I'm going to do it. Or I've always done whatever it is they've always done and continue to do it the same way. And so you never get to, as you say, changing your mind, I'm going to do something different. Eleanor Roosevelt said, do something different every day.
Yes, well, she was a very wise woman and very inspirational. And it's true. She was on to something. She really understood that that's really the case. If you do something different every day, you do something new, you increase your happiness factor. And it's a choice. I mean, we have, in the book we talk about, the only thing necessary to be happy in life is to make the choice. And that is really what it's all about. And the science and the pictures of the mind support that choice.
So if you're 85 years old and you get up in the morning, it doesn't mean that you have to start skiing necessarily.
No, and you don't have to jump out of airplanes either, but it's very little things. You could start a garden. You could talk to a friend on the phone about something upbeat. You could get a new piece of music and really listen to it. You could play an instrument. You could learn a new language. There are so many things you could do. You have to find what makes you happy. I mean, somebody would like to take up racquetball. Another person would like to plant roses. So, it just depends on what makes you happy. And you might have to go back to your early days, to your essence. What did you like to do as a young person? And chances are you probably might still like to do some facet of that. So it's staying active, which everyone always says. We have a chapter in the book calling Keep Moving, because we think maybe people are allergic to the word exercise. And so stop using that word and just say, I'm going to keep moving. So I can get up and dance. And if I have a dog, I can put some music on, dance with my dog. I could jump up and down. I could walk around the block. I could start singing for no good reason. There are a lot of things that we can do to keep ourselves on track and having a better time than we may be having right now.
And are you saying, Mary, that once you do something like that, you do something different, then it's changing those patterns in your brain? It just kind of takes on, I don't want to say it takes on a life of its own, but then it goes to another step. It opens up a kind of a floodgate of new ideas and doing things differently. I mean, I remember, I think it was a therapist who had said, well, one thing that you can do is, let's say that there are certain kinds of, and particularly this works with older people, films that you always go to. Well, really try to go to a film that you absolutely would never see, that you would never choose to go to, and see what happens. Just the opposite of what you usually do. And that's a simple thing to do. It doesn't require anything physical, but it does have to do with with your brain and changing those brain patterns. Is that a good example?
I would say, lots of information comes in visually for us. It's better if you set the intention of what you want to see visually and then go for it. Not all watching television or watching movies is a passive event. You will have experiences that will be triggered by that event. If you can put yourself in charge and say, here's the intention I want to serve, and then find activities that support that, that's a better choice.
All right, for instance, then seeing a movie that you wouldn't necessarily see is not exactly the best example you're saying. So, set up an intention, like what?
Set up an intention to look at a beautiful painting. So go to your local museum or, library and get a picture and just open that book and look at that painting until you really see it. And that will bring out something in you that is new. It may be a reminder of how you looked at something earlier in your life, but it's a new experience for you. Or read a poem, or write a poem, or, the International Positive Psychology Association, IPA, they have all kinds of studies on measuring happiness. And that's where they can look at this experience called the flow, where if you're really involved in something like writing a poem or climbing a rock or something that takes all your attention, then you're in the flow, and that is kind of the highest level of happiness that humans can experience. So there are many, many joys inherent in these activities, and that's something I just love about this whole neuroplasticity.
Yeah, neuroplasticity is obviously something that's, it isn't necessarily new today, but where is it going? What direction is it going in? Because, you're tied into all of that scientific research.
Well, I think one of the most fascinating articles that I've read recently, which we also talk about in the book, was in New York Times Magazine, and it was talking about working on the emotions of a computer. So they're really taking this to extreme strengths, being able to measure what happens with emotions with computers. That's out there, I have
emotions
to say,
and computers, that computers are going to be able to feel, or they do feel?
Something around that. They're testing that now. I can't say that it's a proven strategy yet, but that's where you asked, where is it going, and that's one thing that they're looking at. And amazing things about, people being able to have one emotion in one place and other people have that same emotion in another place. So they're really looking at connections between people, even with great distance, looking at the same thing on a computer. So it's really quite fascinating where this is going. And there are a lot of neuroscientists who are very detailed about the neuroscience, but the people studying the neuroplasticity are really taking it to the next level. I mean, Richard Davidson, who we quote freely in the book, he writes a lot on the emotional life of your brain and what's going on there. So there's a ton of information coming out, and this will keep going. I mean, Gene Stoll and I intend to keep writing these books because this was the first one of where we are to date, but there's no doubt that this neuroscience and neuroplasticity is going forward, and we'll just keep writing another book the next time, because we think these activities and that we put in there on how to do this are really helpful.
Yeah, it's practical. The practical part of it, because a lot of people, they think of it as, neuroplasticity science. I'm not going to be able to understand it, but it's true. With the way you write it, it's for all of us, and there are practical things that we can do every day. We have to say goodbye. Very interesting stuff. Mary Sommerset, author of Letting Go for Fun and Profit, author, speaker, and certified professional coach. Thanks so much for being on the show this morning.
My pleasure. And you can get the book on Amazon or Barnes & Noble, or your local bookstore will have their online copy as well. So I really appreciate it. Thanks so much.
Great. Thanks, Mary. Well, Noah, we're going to say we have a couple more minutes. What do you have to? How's your brain?
This is actually very interesting, but I did I wouldn't call it a class. I wouldn't call it like a study, but I did some neuroplasticity therapy over the summer, and it's really interesting. It works. Basically, what I did is they hooked my brain up to an EKG, and I would watch a movie, and during the movie, if I was feeling anxious, because I have bad anxiety, the screen would go darker, and I would have to train my brain to see the screen lighter and lighter and lighter, even when I was, feeling anxious, so that when in real life I have like an anxiety attack, I can think myself out of it.
And did you do that? I mean, how do you, like, you're watching the screen get darker and darker, you're feeling really anxious. So what happens? So in order to, if you change your feelings, then the screen gets lighter, right?
Well,